and this one guy, he was a pastor, and he came and he talked to me, and I did not record it. I'd kill myself for it. I'll get him back on. But he goes, when I was 30-something, I was in, where was he? Italy? I think he was in Italy. And he's in a small town in Italy, and he's at a conference. He was a business guy, was not a believer. He's walking down this road, and he turns the corner on this road, and this guy comes out, runs out to him, hands him a track, right? Like, he goes, if you were to die today, do you know where you go? And then he doesn't wait for his response, right? And so, like, there's a cringe in me when he first telling me that, because I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah, one of those.
You don't even know the person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and the guy doesn't even wait for his response. He just takes off running. And so he's like, what the heck? And he's walking down the street, but he just can't get this out of his mind. And he starts thinking, well, if I did die today, like, do I know how well did?
Wow.
And we know, right? Like, I know, like, that's the Holy Spirit, like, working on the guy. And and then pretty soon it's like, and then, you know, through a couple days, like, he breaks down in his hotel and comes to know the Lord. Years later, goes through seminary and becomes a pastor of this small church. He's preaching one Sunday and tells the story of how he came to know God, and tells about the story about the guy that ran out. And then someone approaches him after church and says, what town in Italy was that?
No.
And he goes, was it at this corner? He goes, that's how I came to know God.
What?
That man ran out. So years later, he's preaching at a conference, tells the story. 5 different people come to him afterwards and go,
I have full
what
body
time
chills.
in it? What town in Italy was that? Years later, he's preaching at a pastor's conference. It's I think it was Acts 29 or something like that. It was a big, huge pastor's conference.
Wow.
And he tells the story, and he said 15 different pastors come to him, and they're like, what town? That's the guy that came.
No.
And he's like, what are the odds of this stuff? And he asked everyone, every time he'd tell that story and people would come, he'd ask him, he'd be like, have you kept in touch with that guy? And they're like, no, never.
He just
Don't even
ran
know
off.
his name.
Yeah.
So finally he's like, screw it. I've been successful, like I got some extra money now. My kids are in college. He's like, I'm flying to Italy.
I'm gonna find him.
And if that guy is still alive, I'm finding that motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh my
He didn't
god.
say that. But so he flies to Italy. He goes to that square and he sits there for a minute and he's like waiting for, and he's like, this guy has to be like 90 years old. Like,
Yeah.
What?
he's waiting for him to come out on a wheelchair or something. He's like, nothing. And so he starts asking around and he finally finds a girl that's like, oh, I know him. He's still alive. And he lives up here in this apartment. He's lived there for like 40, 50 years. It's an apartment above the little shop there. So he goes up to the apartment, knocks on the door. This little old man comes out and he says, are you so-and-so? He's like, can I come in and talk to you? You gave me a track years ago and I came to know God. This is 30, 40 years later. And this little old man, 94 years old, just starts bawling.
Oh.
And he was like, sir, like, you don't know how many people, I mean, there's so many pastors and so many people that have come to know the Lord. And this guy's just bawling and bawling. And he's like, he clears up and he goes, he's like, I'm at the end of my life. And he goes, when I came to know God, when I was 20, 30 or whatever, when I was younger, I made a promise to God because in his word, he says to share the gospel. He says, I'm going to share the gospel with 10 people a day. And he's like, I'm horrible with people. Like, so I just would go out there. I just got the tracks. I just go out there, give it to him and just be obedient to God.
Oh my god.
And he goes, I'm at the end of my life. And I didn't think, no one has ever told me anything has happened. And I was wondering, has my life made a difference?
What?
Like, and you coming here telling me today, God sent you here to tell me today, right before I died.
Wow.
Dude, I mean, the stuff,
Oh my
I'm like,
gosh.
ooh, I mean, there's so much. One of the coolest parts of that story is that the guy did not see any results
Yeah.
for like 40 years.
Mm.
He just was obeying God.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.